Okay, let's start. Yeah, okay, just start. So, yeah. So after I took a deep breath, so this one is actually not that hard. so basically, so what they did this step is, they may identify the rays that are incompatible to each other. What means incompatible? That is, these rays are definitely from different alternate splicing isoform. For example, these two, they may have for this one, and this is just the nucleotide. Just imagine this is there's a nucleotide, the DNA structure there. So these two, this one is not with the rays observed here. It's not with some sequence observed here. So that means this one just correspond to, there's a possible exon there observed by this rate, just observed by this rate. But this rate is correspond to the exon exclusion, and this one corresponds to the exon inclusion. And also the same one. This same one is like this one, there are some rays here, but for these two rays, this here, the nucleotide here are missing. So that means these three are incompatible to each other. And these three each of them may suggest a possible isoform. And then they build a graph, overlap graph, by using the rays. So basically, two paired rays are linked if they are overlap to each other and if they are compatible to each other. And then you can say the incompatible fragments may form different paths on the final figure. And there's a theory, there's a theory in graph theory that the number of such incompatible fragments exactly equal to the number of paths on that figure. So
you started recording.
Oh yeah. Yeah, sure. So and for most of the cases here, you can see that by using this graph, this graph is informative to most of these alternate splicing events. Like for this one, for the cassette exon. So if this exon is expressed, is included or excluded, there will be a certain path to here, from here to there, and also another path here. So you can see this path is just reflect the alternate splicing structure. And also keep in mind, this is a cyclical graph. May have some cycle, but it's a cyclical. So, and then the next step of the cufflink is just to construct the path over the graph. And what they do is, they just identify the minimal collection of passes can cover the whole, just cover the whole acidic graph. And each of the paths may correspond to one transcript. But please keep in mind here is that there are some possibilities, as the example I have talked about. 2 exons, one alternate splicing is 1 to 2, one isoform is 1 to 2, and the second isoform is just 1. So by using this cufflink will not identify the 2. So one reason here I want to tell about just an intuitive reason here is that because the next step we will see cufflink will quantify the expression level of each isoform. And if you have such cases that are with the two exons, just two isoforms, one isoform is like the 1 and 2, and the second isoform is just the 1. For the MRE step in the cufflink, it will have multiple answer, maximal answer. It will get multiple maximum points. But for the it's just for this algorithm. So the importance of this assumption to get the minimal path over the graph is for the downstream expression level estimation and to enable unique solution to the maximal likelihood. So here this is the step of the estimate transcript abundance. So basically, so what they have is with the observed graph and with the race mapped to each position, just with the race on that graph, and this graph can explain all the race. Yeah. So this is don't be scared by this function. So this is the MRE for the likelihood function to be optimized to get the expression to assess the expression level of each of the isoform. So here rho is the RS total race, observed race, and the rho is the expression level, just the parameter set of the expression level of each isoform. The intuitive idea here is that the likelihood of all the race over the rho equal to the total probability of each rate is from one possible transcript or from all the possible transcripts. So and it equals to this is the multiplication of all the rays, and this is the sum. Transcripts you may have 1, 2, 3 transcripts. You may have the probability of each transcript. You can just do model this. And also under the condition of the transcript of this transcript, what the probability of the rate from this transcripts. And then with building this one, and you can just compute the maximal likelihood and get and infer the parameter in rho, and that is the expression level of each transcript. And here is that and with just with more don't think about the detail part, just get some intuition. And what we need here is that this is the P transcripts. P transcripts can be just estimated by a form like the abundance of transcripts with some idea of with rho and the length of each transcripts, and the probability of each of the rays or fragments that belongs to one specific transcript equals to you can just think about the fragment length, distribute just fragment length and the length of transcripts, and if the can be modeled in this way. And then this is just the total approach of coupling. So first one with the input, just with the alignment result, and the first step just to get the incompatible fragments, and then build a overlap graph by using the incompatible, by using all the fragments and the number of paths on that on the overlap graph equals to the number of incompatible fragments, the number of this kind of cases. And then they construct the path and do MLE with the path structure and all the rays to estimate the expression level of each of the paths, and each of the paths correspond to one isoform. And the coupling requires here are some characteristics of properties of couplings. First, it requires spliced alignment as input, such as top hat. And also it's capable for identifying and quantifying isoforms for RNA-seq data, and can be used on both single-end and paired-end data. So with some adjustments. So here we just use, I think the original design is with FPKM of the paired data as input. And there are following algorithms for differential expression test, namely CAFDIC, and if you will use this pipeline, you will search the CAFLink and top hat, and you will see some manual about CAFDIC. And the second possibility, the second kind of method to reconstruct the isoforms, alternative splicing, is named genome independent reconstruction. So we can say the half-link may need the spliced alignment. So that means we may need the genome reference to conduct the analysis. But sometimes first, it depends on the genome guided reconstruction method may have some challenges. First is it depends on correct read to reference alignment, and also the transcripts encoded by adjacent loci can overlap and thus can erroneously fuse to form a chimeric transcript. And also there are some possible contaminations, and also I think one possibility is that sometimes we may have some novel alternative splicing isoforms there or mechanisms there. So, but the challenge if we don't use the genome independent approach, so the one challenge is the independent reconstruction approach directly build consensus transcripts without alignment. And it's great for the species. So the species without reference genome, and there are some several tools, and I will introduce the idea of Trinity. So Trinity is just a genome. So for the transcripts assembly, is the most different thing for the genome assembly is that it's the lengths are few, but there are large connected. The genome assembly is like there is no alternative splicing, but with large connected sequence graph. But for transcriptome assembly, so there are numerous individual disconnected graphs, but due to the problem of the alternative splicing, so the graph can be more complicated compared to the genome assembly. So here in the Trinity, there are 3 steps, and I would like to introduce the intuition of these 3 steps. So the first step is that for the observed rays, so we can just from the rays to get some k-more space, and just to get some k-more from the rays, and then for each of the k-more, and we will build a graph named the D-brain graph, just to build to link it. And just imagine there is one isoform, and with the k-more start from it, and we just link it, and we get the isoform down. And then we may start, and for the rays, and then we may start from the second isoform for the rest of the rays, and we may start another, just another isoform. And for this, and the second step is that for each, and for the linked contigs, we may get some certain for each of the for each gene, and for the different isoforms of those genes, it will be, if there's alternative splicing happens, and for some isoforms are overlapped to each other, we may get overlaps on the contigs from different isoforms. And then, and for this example, the light blue one is just correspond to one isoform, and the red one corresponds to the second one, and there are there's a blue one and also a pink one. So because the k-more, we just do the k, we just use k-more and to build the graph. So there will be, if this k-more will be k over just will be and there is no k-more in common between these two. The reason is that if this one we use it up, it will just get all of the O to the end. So all the k-mores are k minus one more in common. And with this k minus one more in common, we can build an overlap linear sequence by overlaps of the k minus one more on this contigs and build a graph component like in this way. And you can see this forms one. So this forms one graph, and this forms one way, and this forms one way, and kind of build just a complete graph that may represent the possible alternative splicing event. And the third part is termed the butterfly. And the butterfly is just with the linked contigs in this way by using the k minus one more, and we just do search over the linked graph. And for each of the paths, it may form one possible isoform. So here the Trinity just use an exhaustive search, exhaustive search for after they constructed the graph. They may use an exhaustive algorithm to search all the possible isoforms over the graph. And the performance of there are some testing about the study about the performance of the Trinity, and it can cover in one study of this. In this study, it recovers 91% of the reference protein coding sequences and saturated at 50 megabase per race. So that's basically the test. If there are more race increased, it's kind of with this amount of race, they will observe all the alternative splicing isoforms. And in a mouse study, and there are the in mouse study of the mouse primary immune dendritic cells, 54% of non-mouse genes were identified by using the de novo assembly, by using Trinity. But the Trinity is highly resource needed. So first is the process is highly with a huge memory consumption, and currently here we regularly run Trinity on this on this core server. Yeah.
That we is the person who published the Trinity.
Oh, I see. Okay. I see. Gotcha.
So actually, you can go back and want to have some. Yeah. So the second point, 54% of non-mouse genes were identified, and this is not a bad thing at all. So if you think of this is only one tissue type, and in any tissue type, probably about half of the genome will be expressed at some point. So that is a pretty high sensitivity. Initially, my worry was using assembly-based approach, your sensitivity won't be that much, but it seems it's working pretty well. So that's the first comment I want to make. The second one is for the last point, you see that they have some of the server that, I mean, your laptop won't have 256 gigabytes of memory, right? It's not a hard drive, it's memory. But actually, at IU, we are pretty lucky. I mean, at the UITS, we'll come here to answer some of your questions later. But we actually have a specific server dedicated for Trinity applications. So in the sense that everybody else in the world, when they use Trinity, if they don't have their own server set it up, they will come to IU to use it. And we use that pretty regularly, actually. It's a good, you need to have a special channel to back in, but if that's where your research direction leads you, don't be scared away because you don't have enough computational resources. We do have enough computational resources.
Yeah. So, and as I mentioned, Trinity is very popular, and it's really really functional well on some of the from some performance testing study, but there are still several problems of Trinity. And the first one is that the Trinity uses an exhaustive enumeration algorithm to search for isoform representing pathways in the graph, in the deep brain graph. And it is very sensitive. However, because this one, it's just to do the exhaustive search, it can cause some false discoveries due to the some data contamination or just some falsely linked graph. And also, this is there is one kind of evidence that some other evidences can better support the alternate splicing. For example, if there's one transcript isoform there, so over the transcript, the expression level, if we just say one isoform and the isoform, we just predict one isoform, and the isoform, one part of the isoform are with very high expression, and the rest part is with very low expression. That means the first part may with a possible alternate splicing. But this kind of evidence can be used to guide us to do the alternate splicing inference. So I just want to present one idea. This is one publication. This tool is published in 2016 or 17, I think. So this is just get an idea from cufflink. This method called bridger means they want to bridge the de novo assembly method with the cufflink's idea to find an optimal isoform set that can cover all the rays. So basically, this method still build as Trinity still build the graph of the just from the assembly splicing graph, still build the assembly splicing graphs as Trinity did in the first step, and then from the splicing graph they may infer the compatible graph, and on the splicing graph they just kind of implement the algorithm of coupling to identify compatible graph, and the minimal path covers the compatible graph and get the transcripts. And this and so what I want to mention, the key point I want to carry here is that all the methods they are with certain assumptions, and with if you want to do exhaustive search, you will get more false positive, but with the assumption of the minimal path, you may lose some possible information. So you can do both of that, and then you can see the difference, and to see and to diagnose the data by just run more process. And there are some challenges for the genome independent methods. First, distinguishing sequencing errors from variations. So some SNP may introduce branch points in the graph that may increase the complexity, and also and this may cause problem on assembled contigs. And so it is really need to find the optimal balance between sensitivity and graph complexity. So for this, I think this example is like one extreme case. Just one direction is just to get the optimal, like minimal path cover, and the other direction is to do the exhaustive search. And here are the two. Here we introduced the two kinds of methods for the transcriptome reconstruction methods. It's like one is the genome guided approach based method. In some mechanism, it's like we do the alignment, and from the alignments we build a graph to represent possible isoforms, and from the graph we just do further inference of the expression level. And also, and the other one is genome independent approach. We build k-mer from the rays, and build a deep brain k-mer graph from the k-mers, and use either exhaustive search or minimal path to infer the possible isoforms from this. And also downstream, with this constructed, we can still call expression level to each of the inferred isoform. We can either use the likelihood function defined in cufflink, or we can use some like bin packing idea. There is a method named the bin packer to directly implement can be directly implemented as a downstream of the this kind of de novo assembly based isoform identification. And but once we identify with the data, we do these approaches. These are complicated algorithms to predict the isoforms from the data. So next, actually, we want to study it. We may with a certain purpose. So it can be some biological purpose. We want to study the mechanism why cancer. So we want to study how some alternate splicing, missplicing or differential splicing is associated with cancer progression or some characteristics with cancer. Or it can be we can with a focus to study like more molecular level study, like the possible the regulatory mechanisms, like what regulates the alternate splicing events. So, but currently, if we observe one gene is differentially expressed in cancer, we know the function of the gene. We can do the with some and we found several genes are alternate spliced or are differentially expressed in cancer. If we see these genes are enriched to certain functions or related to certain functions, we can infer okay, these functions may be there. But for the alternate splicing, for all the if we observe the differential alternative splicing, the isoforms are from the same gene, but there is no detailed annotation about the isoforms, about the functions of each isoform of the same gene. So but for some enzymes there is, but for most of the genes, to my best knowledge, there is not. So sometimes we don't have the demand to get all the isoforms. We just if we want to identify some biomarkers, like we want to use alternate splicing as biomarkers, we don't need to get into the isoform. We just say, okay, this exon is differentially expressed, or this alternative splicing event is different there. We don't need to get to the detailed isoform. It's enough to determine, okay, to get enough prediction power for the biomarker study. But for the transcriptional regulatory, for some study on the transcriptional regulatory mechanisms, what we want is just we want to study what triggers the alternative to the regulation of alternative splicing. What we want to see is just the mechanisms, just like certain like the exonic splicing enhancer that may really trigger the inclusion or the inclusion or exclusion of certain exons. What we need is just the transcription, just the alternate splicing event of that exon, rather than a detailed isoform. So with this point, so we change our idea on alternate splicing to another angle to study other than reconstruct all the isoforms. We want to focus on quantification of alternative exon abundance. And this can be used, firstly, it can be used for study of splicing regulation. And secondly is that if you just want to do some prediction biomarker identification without any mechanism interpretation downstream, you just want to say some biomarkers that can be discriminative to disease conditions. These are informative enough. So still from this case, so from the coupling trinity, we can get the result, like the differential alternate splicing. But here, actually, what we just this question doesn't need to be that hard. We just need to see if the alternative splicing event is different, is happening there, and the amount is kind of this isoform is with 20%. This is with 80%. What we need to infer is just how much of this alternative event is happening there. So it's like 20% inclusion and 80% exclusion. So there is a method named MESO to study this to solve this case. So MESO relies on spliced alignment, still as alignment-based method, and here we introduce a definition, the definition of the term PSI is percentage spliced in. So just by this symbol. So it's like named the PSI, and which denotes the fraction of mRNAs that represent the inclusion isoform. Just represent this. Just represent the inclusion this isoform. And it's measured for splicing event, not for isoform. Please keep in mind, because there can be multiple isoforms share one inclusion event, but this is more event centric, not isoform centric. The isoform is a combination of on and of multiple, and the isoform is a combination of on and of multiple events. And here, methods start from the 3 different kinds of race. One is the inclusion race, and inclusion race, exclusion race. This is exclusion race, and inclusion race, and the constitutive race. And they use the relative density between inclusion and exclusion race just to estimate the percentage, just the percentage of inclusion event. And this is quite similar to the early, early exon junction array based method. So basically, the method uses a Bayesian-based approach to estimate the posterior probability of exon inclusion given the risk distribution, and with this assumption of inclusion and exclusion happens. And it's just similar to the MLE function I given in the cuff link. It's with the observed risk, just with the observed risk, what the posterior distribution of the inclusion happens there. And this is the performance on the simulated data, and they found that PSI is an unbiased estimation and of method. And also with the percentage, with this framework, with this model, we can the downstream we can conduct the statistical test of differential splicing. But this is the test purpose is to test the differences in splicing patterns into biology of the splicing event rather than isoforms into biological conditions, like the PSI of condition A and minus PSI of condition B if this is significantly equal to 0. And we can use the just with the Bayes factor, we can use the likelihood ratio test to test this. So these are all about the alternative splicing based so the methods to study alternative splicing in this lecture, and then we will have the Dr. Li to introduce about to do 15 or 20 minutes hands-on introduction about the Linux system, and then I will do the quickly do 20 minutes hands-on part today. Yeah.
This part won't be recorded. Oh, that's fine. You can
yeah.
shut up.